What if your height isn't just a number? What if it's a hidden variable, quietly shaping how your body ages, how people respond to you, and how your life unfolds in ways you've never consciously noticed? Most people grow up thinking height is simple. Taller is better, shorter is cuter, average is nothing special. But biology doesn't work in opinions, and psychology doesn't work in assumptions. Because when researchers actually study height across health, attraction, perception, and long term outcomes, something surprising shows up. Every height range comes with its own built in advantages. Not obvious ones, not loud ones, but subtle, compounding advantages that influence your life every single day. And once you see them, you stop wishing to be different and start understanding exactly how you're built. Let's start at the rarest end of the spectrum. Very short, under 4 feet 11. At this height, a woman sits in one of the smallest categories in the developed world. But biologically, this category is incredibly efficient. Lower levels of IGF-1, the hormone responsible for growth, are often associated with slower cellular aging. In simple terms, the body is running on a smaller system, but one that experiences less wear over time. Think about it like this. A smaller engine running under less strain tends to last longer. And that's exactly what large-scale longevity studies have suggested for decades. The shorter the individual, the longer the average lifespan, especially among women. There's also the mechanical side. Less body mass means less stress on joints, less pressure on the spine, and lower impact force in falls, which statistically become one of the biggest physical risks later in life. But biology is only half the story, because perception matters too. Across multiple cultures, very short women consistently rank higher on femininity association scales. The visual contrast, the proportions, the dynamic, it aligns closely with what people subconsciously associate with softness and femininity. And in dating research, the most preferred height difference is naturally satisfied in this range, without effort. That means something important. What looks like a limitation quietly becomes an advantage. The core strength here is concentrated efficiency, a body that ages slower, moves lighter, and fits seamlessly into widely preferred social dynamics. Now move up slightly. Short, around 5'0" to 5'3". This is the most populated height range in women in the world. And because it's so common, most people completely overlook its advantages. But in psychology, being in the middle of the crowd can be one of the most powerful positions you can have, because you don't trigger extremes. Women in this range are rarely labeled immediately. They're not seen as too small, not too imposing. Instead, they're perceived as approachable, warm, easy to connect with. And here's where it gets interesting. First impressions happen in seconds, and they shape everything that follows. When people feel comfortable around you instantly, conversations open faster. Trust builds quicker, resistance drops. In professional environments, this often translates into influence. Not loud, dominant influence, but quiet, consistent influence that grows over time. People listen to those they feel safe around, and this height range naturally creates that effect. In dating, it sits at what many studies describe as the sweet spot. Enough height difference to match preferences, but without physical limitations in everyday life. The core advantage here is frictionless presence. You move through social spaces without resistance, and that allows connection to happen faster than most people realize. Now we reach the balance point. Average height. 5'4" to 5'6". This is where human female height statistically stabilizes. But more importantly, this is where advantages begin to stack. Biologically, this range sits between two worlds. You still retain much of the metabolic efficiency seen in shorter frames, while gaining some of the structural advantages found in taller ones. Less strain than tall frames, more strength potential than shorter ones. It's balance in its purest form. But the real power here is psychological. Research consistently shows that people at average height trigger the fewest automatic assumptions. They're not instantly categorized, not labeled as petite, not labeled as intimidating. And when people don't label you immediately, you gain something incredibly valuable: control. You decide how people see you. You define your presence instead of fighting against expectations. In dating, this range is the most adaptable across all partner types. Shorter, taller, similar height, it all works without imbalance. And in long-term relationship studies, this range often reports the highest overall satisfaction because compatibility friction is lower from the start. The core advantage here is universal adaptability. You fit into almost any environment without needing to adjust. Now we move into a different energy. Tall, 5'7" to 5'10". This is where height stops being neutral and starts becoming a signal, because in human psychology, height is strongly associated with authority. Taller women are consistently perceived as more confident, more capable, and more leadership ready before they even speak. And that first impression matters more than most people think, because once people assume competence, everything shifts. Your ideas are taken more seriously, your presence carries more weight, opportunities open faster. That initial perception compounds over time. Physically, there are real advantages too. Longer limbs improve reach, stride efficiency, and movement mechanics, especially in athletic contexts. And in dating, something interesting happens. The pool becomes more selective, but also more intentional. People who are drawn to taller women tend to know exactly what they're looking for, which often leads to stronger initial commitment. The core advantage here is preloaded presence. Before you say a word, the room already pays attention. And finally, the most distinctive category, very tall, 5'10" and above. This is the top 5% globally. And with that rarity comes something incredibly powerful, visibility. In a world where most people blend in, very tall women stand out instantly. And standing out, when used correctly, becomes a massive advantage. In industries like fashion, entertainment, leadership, and athletics, this level of presence isn't just accepted, it's actively sought. Because people remember what's different, and memorability is one of the most underrated assets in life. If people remember you, you stay in opportunities longer, you stay in conversations longer, you stay in people's minds longer. Physically, this is where structural advantages peak: maximum reach, maximum stride, maximum leverage. But there are trade-offs: more mechanical load on the body, higher long-term strain, greater need for maintenance. And socially, the dating pool becomes the most selective. But within that selectivity lies something important. The partners that step into that space tend to be more secure, more confident, and less threatened by presence, because it takes confidence to stand next to someone who naturally commands a room. The core advantage here is unforgettable presence. You don't need to try to be seen. You already are. So now I want to ask you something. Which category are you in? And more importantly, did you just realize that what you once saw as ordinary might actually be your biggest advantage?